SpaceX is valued at $350 billion. Pause. When it IPOs, it will instantly become one of the largest companies on the planet. And if you own VTI or VOO, you're about to become a SpaceX shareholder, whether you plan to or not. But here's what nobody's talking about. These two ETFs will not give you the same exposure. One of them will buy significantly more SpaceX stock than the other. And if you pick wrong, you're leaving serious upside on the table. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which Vanguard ETF wins the SpaceX lottery, and why the answer depends on one critical factor most investors completely ignore. Let's start with VOO, the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. Pause. VOO tracks the S&P 500 index. That's 500 large-cap U.S. companies selected by a committee at S&P Global. And here's the thing most people don't realize, the S&P 500 is not automatic. A company doesn't just hit a certain market cap and get added. There's a committee, they meet quarterly, they have criteria. To join the S&P 500, a company needs 4 consecutive quarters of positive earnings. It needs adequate liquidity. It needs to be a U.S. company. And here's the kicker, it needs the committee to actually vote yes. SpaceX, right now, reportedly meets the profitability requirement, but it's still private. The moment it IPOs, the clock starts ticking on inclusion. But that clock could run for months, sometimes years. Stop and think about what that means. Pause. If SpaceX IPOs tomorrow, VOO doesn't buy a single share until the committee decides to add it. You could be waiting 6 months, you could be waiting 18 months. Tesla went public in 2010. It wasn't added to the S&P 500 until December 2020. 10 years. Now let's talk about VTI. Pause. VTI tracks the CRSP US Total Stock Market Index. This is a completely different animal. The Total Market Index doesn't have a selection committee picking winners. It's rules-based. If you're a US company, you're publicly traded, and you meet minimum liquidity thresholds, you're in. This means the moment SpaceX IPOs and settles into normal trading, VTI starts accumulating shares. No committee meeting, no waiting period, no arbitrary delays. The fund mechanically rebalances to include every investable US stock. So here's pattern interrupt number 1. VTI will own SpaceX before VOO does. Pause. That's not speculation. That's how the indexes work. But wait, here's where it gets interesting. Let's look at what happened with Tesla. In 2020, when Tesla finally got added to the S&P 500, it entered as one of the largest companies ever included. The weighting was massive. VOO had to buy approximately $80 billion worth of Tesla stock in a single rebalancing event. That's not a typo. $80 billion. The stock jumped 70% in the weeks leading up to inclusion. VTI owners, they already held Tesla. They'd held it for years. They captured that entire run-up. Pause. VOO owners bought at the top. But here's the counter-argument, and I have to be honest with you. Once SpaceX is in the S&P 500, VOO will likely have a higher weighting than VTI. Why? Because VOO only holds 500 stocks, VTI holds over 3,600. When you concentrate into fewer holdings, each mega-cap stock represents a bigger slice of your portfolio. So the real question isn't which ETF will own SpaceX. They both will, eventually. The question is, do you want early exposure or maximum concentration? Pause. Let me give you the numbers. If SpaceX enters the S&P 500 at a $400 billion market cap, it would represent roughly 1% of VOO. In VTI, it might represent 0.8% to 0.9%, but you'd own it months earlier. Run the math on Tesla. Early VTI holders captured gains that VOO holders literally could not access because the stock wasn't in their index yet. Here's what I'd actually do. Pause. If you believe SpaceX will follow Tesla's trajectory, massive growth between IPO and S&P inclusion, VTI gives you the early access advantage. If you believe SpaceX will IPO and immediately get fast-tracked into the S&P 500, the difference shrinks dramatically, and VOO's concentration advantage starts to matter more. But let's be real. The S&P committee has never fast-tracked anything. Pause. They made Tesla wait a decade. They made Meta wait. They made Google wait. The committee moves slow. That's a feature, not a bug, but it means VTI holders get first access. Bottom line, VTI wins the timing game. VOO wins the concentration game. Eventually, for most investors, that early exposure window is worth more than a few extra basis points of waiting 18 months later. Now here's what I need you to do. If this breakdown helped you understand how these ETFs actually work, hit subscribe right now. I'm covering the SpaceX IPO the moment it's announced, and I'll show you exactly how to position your portfolio. Don't miss it.